So today we're going to be doing something different. Today we are going to be quilting a 9-patch quilt block. So I love to do it the way my grandparents did it, and instead of running out and buying fabric, they would use things that cloth from materials that they were going to just throw away. So let me show you what I've got here. I'm going to turn around. So here I have a tank top that I shrunk out of. I lost weight and it was way too big, but it wasn't the quality that you just feel like you should donate or give it to somebody. So it's perfect to cut off the bottom and use for quilt scraps. And then I have a dress here. It's a maternity dress. I did know it. I'm not pregnant. So what I did was cut off the bottom of it, and I'm going to sew up the sides and make it just a regular top. Cut off some areas and yeah, I don't need all that belly room anymore. Okay, so I cut pieces off of the bottom of each of those because they go together quite well. And I have made this. So it's basically just a checkerboard pattern. So if I were going to do this as a full-size quilt for my bed or as a blanket, that kind of thing, I would do this differently. There is a way to do lots of these if you're going to be making lots of blocks, and that's for another video. But this is just small scale. It's only going to be that big. So let's begin. First things first, let me come around here. Now you could sew each of these by hand. It's not that big of a project if you wanted to do it by hand. And currently my Quilting Club is doing this by hand. But I'm going to use my sewing machine. This is my favorite. And I'm going to be using it today just to speed things along so you don't have to watch me go quite so slow. But let me first explain to you the process. Let me see if I can switch this around. Okay, so I've laid them all out like this. So you can think of it as 3 individual rows. The first row and the third row are exactly the same. The second row is opposite. So let's look at this in terms of rows. So here would be one row. That's one row. We're going to sew that one together first. Then we'll do the second row and the last row. So we're going, I'm sorry if you couldn't see that just quite right. I'm trying to hold the phone and do all these at the same time. So first we're going to sew one row, and then I'll pause. I'll show you the next one and we'll put them all together. Then we'll quilt it. That'll be fun. Okay, so now you can see I've got each row sewn together. And now what I'm going to do is take the right sides, put them against each other, and I'm going to sew right across there. And then I'll do the same thing connecting this one to the second row. Okay, so I'm going to take a moment and I'm going to pin this so when I'm sewing it, it doesn't shift. This is a knit fabric and it really likes to stretch on me and get out of position where I put it. So that's why I go along and I put stick pins in along the way, just to hold it. Okay, and here you can see I've got these 2 rows sewn together, and now I'm going to turn this one over on this one. So right along there, and then when you open it up, it will be all together. Okay, well I've got all 3 rows sewn together, and we have 9 pieces of fabric in a checkerboard pattern like this. So now what are we going to do with it? Okay, well, if you had a bunch of these, you could put like long horizontal and diagonal, not diagonal, no, horizontal and vertical stripes in between them. And my grandparents would refer to this as breaking a quilt. You would have the rows separating them, and some would just like sew each of these patches together, or there's so many things you could do with it. There's so many different looks with the basic 9 block. But here's what I'm going to do. Oh, also another thing, you could just sew a back onto it. You could sew a back here and stuff it like a pillow. And this could be the top of a pillow. That would be cool too. But the purpose of this video is to teach you how to quilt. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it a small little sandwich. So this is going to be the top. We refer to that as a quilt top. But here it's just a very small quilt. So that's going to be the top. And then we're going to have in the middle a layer of quilt batting. Now there's 2 different kinds. One is very dense and thin, and one is thick and looks almost like the inside of a pillow, kind of fluffy. You could use either one you want. You want one that is the same size as your quilt block here. And then we need, the bottom layer is going to be whatever color fabric you would like. I'm going to use, so this was from the front of a t-shirt. I'm going to use the back of that t-shirt to be all on the back here. So I will show you what that looks like. But first a quick trip, because I really thought I had some quilt batting here, but I don't. So I'm going to have to run out and get some, and then we'll do the rest of it. Okay, well, it is time to quilt. So notice, remember I said the back that I'm using is the back of an old t-shirt. You can see here's the bottom of the t-shirt, and there's the side. That's going to get cut off, so don't worry about that. I have my quilt batting, and in all honesty, I couldn't find the quilt batting I wanted, but I did find a couple pieces of felt, so I could use that. And then I have my quilt top here. Okay, so for the quilting, basically you're going to need a hoop. This is a 4-inch for this small project. On the larger project, I'd use a larger hoop. And you're going to need some kind of coordinating thread. I'm using red. I could use white. I could use so many different colors, but I wanted one that would show up so you can see what I'm doing. I have a needle and thread here. So here's my needle, thread. And let me show you how to tie a knot, because I found that when I was working with my class, that was the first thing that they struggled with. Okay, let's tie a knot. So notice I have a needle, I have my thread, and I've got one piece that's longer than the other piece. So I'm going to go to the end of the long piece. See if you can see that. It's a piece of red fabric. So watch how I do a knot. Now, I find it helpful. It's not hygienic or safe, but I like my fingers. And then I just take the end of that and I just roll it, see, around my finger, and I just roll it off. Roll it off. You might need to have your needle or your finger help roll it off your finger. And then hold, see where it's all twisted right there together? Hold that down and pull. And you have a knot. I'm going to do it one more time, because you want to make sure that your knot is big enough so it's not going to come through your fabric. And I'm making this a little extra big so you can watch the process. Hold it down, pull. That's a big knot. That's not going to come through my fabric. Okay, so that is how you tie a knot. Okay, so first let's start with our hoop. When you first get this from the store, it's going to be very tight, so you loosen it up. Look at my fall chucks there. It's fall now. Okay, so loosen that up. Okay, this part, the one that's completely solid, is going to go in the back. And we're going to start in the center. It's always best to start in the center and work your way out, because any imperfections in what you did will get pushed to the edge. Okay, so that's underneath there. I'm going to loosen this up considerably because it's got a lot of fabric that it's got to go around. And because I've got that felt in there, it's thicker than normal quilt batting. So, whew, this is a chore. Okay. Give me just one moment, I need to pick it up. Okay, slight change of plans here, because when I had the 2 pieces of felt that was serving as my quilt batting here, this hoop, I took the screw all the way out, and yet even at its biggest, it just kept popping off. And there was no way, by the time I got it on and secure, it was too far apart for the screw to reach from one end to the other. So instead of making it, most of it was 2 thicknesses, I just cut a piece off the bottom. And instead of most of it overlapping, we'll just quilt that alongside, and that will be okay. That way it is only 1 thickness all the way, and the quilting hoop can go under it. So as we did before, I'm going to put this underneath. That already feels better. At least feels possible. Okay, so put the top down, put the screw back in. Let me pause so I can use 2 hands for this. Okay, as you can see, that is still not working. So quilt batting is actually definitely the way we need to go. But I'm going to quilt this anyway, and I'm going to make this work. Even though my screw would not reach over to here to secure it, I'm just going to have to quilt carefully. So we're going to pretend for a moment that that is nice and secure, and we're going to go about business. So we can quilt any way our heart desires. We can go around the edges. We can put a heart in the middle. We can do an X in each one. We could do diagonals all over it. We could do horizontal and vertical lines through the whole project. It's whatever you want to do. I am going to choose to go on each side of the seam, and that way when I'm finished, every block will have an basically lined part on the inside. So we have our knot, the end of our string here that I've got the camera on. Okay, so let's begin. So your knot should be tied so it doesn't go through the fabric, but we're going to help it along, and we're actually going to say, hey, please do go through the fabric. So I'm going to come over here at the side, and I'm going to kind of help it along. I'm going to gently tug, because I made a very big knot, much bigger than you will need. So I'm going to try to help it in, and that's why I went in at the seam. I'm going to try to help it, pull it through. So that it just enters. And I did exactly what I didn't want to do, and I broke it. So I have to tie another knot. Just put it around my finger, hold it down, do it again. Not so big this time. Okay, that's all the knot I really need. I'm gonna go and pull that rest of what was that big knot out. Knot wasn't big enough, so it came all the way through. Okay, last shot here. I think this will get it. Just like that. Okay. Now, we're basically just going in all the way, out all the way, not around your hoop, because that'll be a mess. In all the way, out all the way, and you're going to feel on the back side to make sure that you can feel, see, it popped off. See my needle there? We want to feel that on each side. So I'm going to put this back on and show you what we do. Okay, as you can see, I've got a couple of stitches down here. I'm going to continue, let me see. I'm going to continue to go around the edge. and do every one of these quilt blocks, and then I will show you the finished project. Okay, so full disclosure here, because this hoop kept popping off because this craft felt was so thick underneath, I had to just give up trying the hoop, put it aside, and got out my trusty sewing machine. So I went down each seam, and because this fabric is a very stretchy fabric, it's a knit fabric, it wants to go all different ways, which makes it not as square as I wanted it to be. But I'm only using this to hold hot pots, so it's gonna be okay. But now it's time to hem it. So you could go around each of those if you wanted to by hand, and that's fine. Or you could do machine, that's okay too. You could put, as I said before, you could put shapes or, diagonals or whatever you wanted to do. But I've trimmed, notice, all the way around the quilt top here. I've trimmed, and you've got the fabric behind it. So what we're going to do, and I've left about 1 inch all the way around. So what I'm going to do is fold up about 1/2 inch, which is really from the edge to the edge of the quilt top, and then fold that over. And then I'm going to hand sew all the way along the edge to the corners. When we get to the corners, so for right now, I'm going to pin. And then I'll show you what the corners will look like. So we're going to fold, going to pin it, stick myself, ouch. Surprised me more than it hurt actually, but stick the pin in and back out. Yay, without sticking myself, that's awesome. Folding down the fabric, folding it over, putting a pin in it. Okay, so that's holding that there nicely. For the corners, watch how I do this. I'm going to fold up to where the point touches, and I'm going to do the same fold that I had with the other side. And then with this side. So there's not so much fabric there. You didn't get to see that, I'm sorry, I didn't have it in focus. So let me show you on one where I haven't started pinning. The corner is going to go up, and actually it can come up onto the fabric a little bit. You're going to fold this side to here, and then the side to here. That's half of it. I'm going to pin that side in place. Fold half, and then fold it up onto the quilt top. And notice that's what we call a mitered corner, so it means it's on the slant there. Okay, so when I sew, I'll make sure that corner gets tucked in nicely, and I will sew along this edge and sew that down. Okay, notice I've pinned it all around. The corners I'll pay extra close attention to when I get there, so it's okay that they look a little messy right now. I have my needle and thread here. Notice there's a knot in my longest end, and I'm going to go in just like this. I'm going to hide that knot. I'm going to back that pin out a little bit. And I'm just going to sew these two sides together. I'm going to try to hide my stitches as much as I can. Now you could totally whip stitch this, but if you get just a tiny little bit from each side, you will not notice the stitches as much. So the first one, I didn't do so great with that. But then the rest will do neater. We want them so you can just barely see them. So this needed to be pinned tighter because it was coming out. Okay. And then I'm just going to continue up this way, all the way around, and then until I'm back at the end. So let me do a few more stitches. Show you what I'm doing. So I'm sticking that corner down in there. That's how I take care of the corners. Get just a little bit from each side. You really don't need much. And that helps you not see the thread so much. So you could do it like that and get just a little bit. That's one style of stitching. But then you could also do what's called a ladder stitch, where you go in one side and then come over here, go in, come out like that, come over across, and a poke out in the pink. And you're going to come over in the red, do the same thing. Oops, caught on the pin. So this ladder stitch helps it be a little bit more invisible and still holds it nicely. And it is a very quick stitch to do. So you just go through. You're not going all the way through the back. Notice that none of my stitches went all the way through the back. The only thing you see there is that pin, which will come out in just a minute. So I went through there. Make sure it's folded down nicely, because the pin holds it pretty much in place, but not always perfectly. Okay, and I will pause the video. I'm going to just keep doing this stitch all the way around, and then you'll see it when it's finished. Okay, and there we have the finished product. This did not go as planned. So what have I learned today? I've learned not to use craft felt for quilt batting, even though it feels awesome. I wish you could feel it. It feels great. It is difficult to quilt through to even get the needle in. It's too thick for when you try to put the hoop on it, and so I ended up having to use a sewing machine on these lines, and because it's a knit fabric, it would stretch and go in different ways that I didn't intend, but we have it. We have a 9-patch block, and I could put anything hot there. It's big enough that I could fold it over if I needed to for something, but probably most of the time it'll end up being on my hand and getting a pan out of the oven. So all in all, I think it's pretty good. I like it, and maybe a neater job next time. All right, thank you for joining me. Talk to you soon.